Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
When people are taking the time to go online and pony up money, it really does tell us where their support is lying.
Where's the money flowing? Ahead of the provincial election, we'll tell you how the four main BC parties stack up on donations. Plus,
if you're not compliant with them, they'll get violent with you, they'll drag you out of your tent.
Crab Park campers and advocates claim rangers are cracking down harder amid the summer heat. And
I think it's crazy. I mean, this is inconvenience.
Too hot to stay open? Several Hudson's Bay stores across BC are closed. Is it more than just the heat wave?
It's pretty evident that they're not investing in regular upkeep.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. With just over 3 months before the next provincial election, BC's major political parties are trying to fill their war chests with donations from you. While some parties are flush with cash, others are struggling. And as Katie DeRosa reports, the latest political donations show where some voters' loyalties lie.
Political polls can be an imperfect science when predicting election outcomes, but money, it talks.
But when people are taking the time to go online and pony up money, it really does tell us where their support is lying.
That's why the latest fundraising figures for the four major BC political parties speak volumes when it comes to voter intention. The governing BC NDP is way out in front, with $2.2 million raised just in the last 3 months. However, the BC Conservatives are surging.
Donations are a really tangible example of how our support has been increasing, and we're going to need a huge war chest to go up against the NDP machine.
The party has raised $1.1 million in that same period, almost a threefold increase from the first quarter of this year. Conservative leader John Rustad has even caught the attention of the former leader of the BC Greens.
My prediction is that the BC Conservatives will win. When I know that people who voted for me, and I know that people who have historically voted NDP, are seriously considering voting BC Conservative in this NDP town, that tells me something.
Premier David Eby says he's confident the NDP's record will stand up come Election Day.
And hopefully we'll be able to show people the costs of bringing back any variety of the former BC Liberals that are currently running under different names under the Witness Protection Program. And we'll see what they have to say on Election Day.
The official opposition, BC United, have taken a hit in donations, bringing in $627,000 in the last 3 months. Meanwhile, the BC Greens fundraising numbers have remained steady, with $334,000 brought in. Not only have the BC Conservatives eclipsed BC United in fundraising, they've also poached some of their candidates. Former BC United MLAs Eleanor Sturco and Lorne Dirksen crossed the floor to join the Conservatives, and Chris Moore jumped ship last month to run under the Conservative banner in Powell River Sunshine Coast. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
After the city of Surrey's long, winding policing saga, the province and the city today have reached an agreement on the transition to Surrey Police Service.
Our agreement includes funding of up to $250 million over 10 years. This includes the current $150 million commitment and a financial guarantee to pay up to $20 million per year for the difference between the salary costs of the Surrey Police Service and the costs that would have been paid for RCMP salaries.
Farnworth adds the province's assistance will ensure increased costs are not offloaded onto Surrey taxpayers. He also points out the city of Surrey asked to negotiate with the province after it lost a court battle over the transition. A head-on crash has killed a family of 3 in Agassiz, including a child. It happened very early Tuesday morning along Lougheed Highway. Police say a car and a tractor-trailer collided. 2 adults in that car died at the scene. An infant that was also with him was airlifted to hospital and died a few hours later. The driver of the tractor-trailer was not hurt. It's not yet clear what caused that crash, but investigators say they do not believe alcohol or drugs were involved. The crash closed a stretch of Lougheed for most of Sunday, but it has since reopened. Meanwhile, 3 passengers have been killed after a single vehicle crash just north of Invermere. Police say it happened last night when a car went off the road and crashed down an embankment. The 3 victims died at the scene. The driver was taken to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. RCMP say in this case, speed and intoxication are believed to have played a role. A drive-by shooting caused damage, but no injuries at a business in Yaletown in the morning. Vancouver police say it happened just after 8 a.m. A spokesperson for Isabel's Cocktail Bar on Hamilton Street confirms it was hit by gunfire. They say they only heard about the shooting hours after and are still waiting for police to share more details with them. A motive is not yet clear. More than 100 affordable homes are ready for Indigenous people to move into in Surrey as part of Phase 2 of the Sokeya development.
We want the families who live here to think less about how they are going to make rent, but more about enjoying life in their community. Housing is also an important marker on the path to reconciliation with Indigenous people.
Combined with 73 homes finished in Phase 1 in 2019, Sokeya now has 177 units. The project is part of a $19 billion housing investment by the provincial government. Decorated Second World War veteran and Oak Bay fundraising stalwart John Hillman has died.
More thanks than I really deserve.
The 105-year-old raised more than $400,000 for the Save the Children charity through his walkathons. For the past 5 years on his birthday, Hillman would walk a lap for every year of his life outside his former retirement home. Staff confirm he died in his sleep on Sunday.
That kind of dedication to public good, I certainly see it in other aspects of our community. I think he was really an exemplary model of what that looks like. Just how do I use my life to make the world a better place? That's hard to replace.
Hillman joined the Royal Air Force in 1937. He served as a radio operator in the Second World War and helped drop supplies to allies. Carlton House says it plans to continue Hillman's legacy by opening his fundraising page every year on his birthday. Well done, sir. About 20 heat warnings are still in effect for some parts of our province, and finding relief from that heat can be tough at the best of times. If you have no shelter or live outdoors, it's that much more difficult to keep comfortable. As Belle Puri shows us, advocates for people in Vancouver's Crab Park encampment claim park rangers have become increasingly heavy-handed amid the heat wave.
It's an empty patch where there once was an anticipated harvest.
There are tomato plants this high. They had flowers on them, so they're about to bloom into tomatoes, like probably today or tomorrow. And there is some cucumber or squash as well.
Advocates blame the disappearing garden on ongoing Vancouver Park Board cleanup efforts.
The rangers have been really brutal and just terrorizing the encampment every day.
The Crab Park encampment gets regular visits from park rangers accompanied by Vancouver police officers.
Every single day they come in here and take things that people need for survival. So things like the tarps, the canopies, the coolers for ice and water during this heat wave where people are just trying to make things a little bit more survivable, are being seized by the rangers.
There are currently 9 tents in a designated area of the park.
They come in every morning and a group of them stay here for about an hour and a half and they take anything that's not nailed down. It's really abrasive and if you're not compliant with them, they'll get violent with you, they'll drag you out of your tent.
The Park Board and the city have maintained their shared goal is to support those who shelter outdoors to come inside. In a statement to CBC, the Vancouver Park Board says the coolers were part of excessive belongings being kept outside of a tent site, which is in contravention of the park's bylaw and general manager's guidelines for the designated area. The occupant of the tent, it says, did not respond when rangers reached out to discuss prioritizing which items they wanted to keep in their tent.
The rangers are really making things difficult for the heat, for homeless people. They're not going to solve homelessness by getting rid of us.
The Park Board says the coolers have been stored. If the owner wants them back, they can be returned. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
If you've gone shopping recently, you may have noticed many Hudson's Bay stores in BC unexpectedly closed this week. The company says the heat wave is putting a strain on air conditioning systems. But as John Hernandez explains, retail analysts believe it's a symptom of a much bigger problem facing the storied Canadian franchise.
Customer after customer locked out.
Well, something's wrong with this place.
Vancouver's Hudson's Bay store closed for days. The company issued no notice of the closure online or on its phone lines, frustrating customers like Janice Fairley.
It's the second time I've come all the way downtown, and the first time some guy came to the door and just posted a sign just as everyone was waiting here.
That sign claims scheduled system maintenance. But after more stores closed in places like West Vancouver, Victoria, Surrey, and even Prince George, the company told CBC News the heat wave has strained air conditioning systems at many of its locations.
I was in a little while ago, and they shut down. I think I was the last non-employee.
This retail analyst we reached in Penticton says the closures are a symptom of a bigger trend.
It's pretty evident that they're not investing in regular upkeep and keeping the stores fresh. That is pretty clear, not just now, but for maybe the last couple of years.
Many customers have taken note of a steadily declining shopping experience.
The other time I went here, the escalator wasn't working, so I don't know what's happening to Hudson's Bay. It's inconvenience for the shoppers.
The staff is kind of, up in arms. There's nothing they can do.
Some retail analysts say the historic Canadian company's American owners are less interested in stores and more interested in the land they sit on. The downtown Vancouver site is slated for a massive redevelopment.
Hudson's Bay, or HBC, is really more of a real estate company with a side order of retail.
This analyst says the owners could sell off more sites and leases in the future.
They may sell it, they may keep it. I personally think that the Bay probably needs to shrink considerably, that you don't need these big department stores. They could probably get away with half the space, a third of the space they have now.
An uncertain future for a once mighty Canadian company. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Cooks Ferry Indian Band near Spence's Bridge is demanding accountability from railway companies. They claim they were responsible for several fires on band land over the past 3 months. As Jennifer Norwell explains, the band chief is concerned there could be a disaster if the companies don't provide what it calls proper fire suppression efforts.
The side of the Highway 1, just about a kilometer outside of Spence's Bridge. This is just outside of where the Cooks Ferry Indian Band has its communities. And they say in the last 70 days, there's been 5 fires that have been caused, they believe, from rail trains coming through the area, sparking off a fire. Behind me, there's a fire that was started on July 1st. Now it's about 40 degrees. That day, it was about 15 degrees cooler. And they say if it had been temperatures like this, there's a real risk that that fire could have caught and it could have traveled huge distances around the community, perhaps causing a substantive fire.
It's a tumultuous time that really takes the life out of a person. You can't move on.
And I don't think that this is just an Cooks Ferry issue or a Lytton issue. This is a Canada issue. We hear over and over that any community, municipality that's adjacent to a rail line has had issues with their relationship with the rail line and how the rail lines respond to those incidences.
And so what they're asking for is that the rail lines, CP and CN, along with the federal government, do more to help support community. This isn't just items, it's not just money, it's all of it. Because they feel that at this point in a small community, it's not a matter of whether or not there's going to be a rail-caused fire, it's when it happens and what kind of resources are going to be happening and in place when that fire happens.
They follow their act. There's federal acts in the transportation that they are responsible for following and take responsibility for the damage that is caused and originating on their rail line.
Jennifer Norwell, CBC News, Spence's Bridge.
Let's bring in our science and climate specialist, Darius Madavi, for a first look at the weather. Darius, first of all, what is the wildfire danger in Spence's Bridge right now?
Still extremely high, from high to extreme fire danger down in the area, so you can understand why they would be so concerned about any possible new fire starts, because at this level of fire danger, it's very easy for those to spread and really rapidly get out of control, which is actually what we saw last night with dozens of new fire starts, largely due to lightning, because we're heading into the part of the fire season where that is more common. And as we see this ridge of high pressure start to break down, we're going to see the possibility of more lightning activity down here, because we don't get that suppressive effect of that cap on the atmosphere. Now, with that being said, the ridge of high pressure will stay in place enough, the ridge will stay in place enough that we're not going to get any precipitation down in the south from any fronts moving in, any low pressure moving in, but we can see those convective storms. So sort of not what we'd want to see on either front. We're still hot, but we also now have the possibility of lightning. In the north as well, there is lightning risk, as we do have a cold front moving in, which you can see there, before a ridge builds back in a little while later. Now, if we take a look at the look across the province, you can see heat warnings have dropped for the northeast and on the coast, but remain in place for the interior. Keep in mind, though, on the coast, temperatures are still quite high in many places, so please stay safe still. And we do have that severe thunderstorm watch up, and you can see all that lightning activity that we do have happening. And if we zoom into the north, you can get a better look at that. It was this morning over here, the lightning activity was happening here, and it is continuing to move further and further east. And the BC Wildfire Service has warned that they do think there'll be many new fire starts as a result of that front moving through. If we zoom in on the south, I just want to highlight, this is last night, so we're going back in time a bit, but this is that front, this is that small cell that popped up, just a convective storm cell, very small, very limited in scope, but it brought a lot of lightning activity and some very heavy rain, but the rain wasn't enough to prevent all these new fire starts, which came all from that lightning activity. And this is all this cluster right down here, virtually all new fire starts. So as we continue to see that front in the north start to sweep through with a lot more lightning activity, expect to see some new fire starts. So we'll keep you updated on that.
Okay, Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
As it continues to stare at sagging poll numbers, there are still questions about whether it's time for the federal governing Liberals to have a new leader. On CBC Radio's The Early Edition today, host Stephen Quinn asked a cabinet minister if Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is a liability or an asset. Here is how François-Philippe Champagne responded.
Leaving the personalities apart, in which society do you want to live in? What is dear to you? How would you, to whom would you give the key of the house? That's really what I say to folks. And when I'm in the street, people said, I'd rather give you the keys.
Liability or asset?
I would say I'm always focusing on making sure that we do what's right for Canadians, and they'll make the final choice. That's how democracy works.
You are not saying that the Prime Minister, that Justin Trudeau, is an asset going into the next election.
He's the leader. He's been providing leadership, and that's what Canadians want to see.
And you can hear that full interview with the federal minister on the CBC Listen app. There were some slippery passengers at Vancouver International Airport today. Dozens of eels spilled out of a container box right onto the tarmac. As Michelle Morton shows us, they gave fellow flyers a bit of a scare.
You've heard of the movie Snakes on a Plane, but what about this plot twist? Eels. A video being shared on social media shows a shipment spilling live eels onto Vancouver International Airport's tarmac. In a post on the platform X, formerly known as Twitter, you can see dozens of eels slithering on the ground near some workers as more fish slip down the loading ramp from a white container one by one. The airport says in a statement the incident happened this past Sunday involving an Air Canada flight from Toronto. The airline says Air Canada Cargo was handling a shipment of live eels when the container accidentally spilled during unloading, but the eels were collected and repackaged. Air Canada says it's also in contact with the customer. While it's not clear who captured the footage at this point, the video has been shared by multiple accounts online and has garnered thousands of views. CBC has reached out to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency for comment, but has not heard back by deadline. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
If you're in downtown Vancouver tonight, you'll notice a lot more cyclists on the street, along with several road closures. That's because the Gastown Grand Prix is about to begin. And that is where we find the CBC's Caroline Chan. Bit loud there, Caroline. What's happening right now?
Well, Dan, in a couple of seconds, the start of the women's professional race is going to start. So that's what we're waiting for right now. And you can hear the crowd just going, and they're getting hyped up. So we're just gonna wait for this, and let them roll, and I will tell you, because it's such a fantastic day to be on this course. The weather really has just cooperated. Where I'm standing, it's just, there's a nice little cool breeze, it's not as hot, and the main thing is that it's dry, because you have to remember that we are on cobblestones. I'm told that some of these cyclists have ridden in Europe on lots of cobblestones, so this will be quite normal, natural for them, I guess. We already had the opening ceremony earlier today, and just moments ago. And so we've been waiting for like the start of this. I'll sit. And they're really hyping up the crowd. There's a lot of crowds. The organizers think that there's going to be at least 20 to 30,000 people along this courseways. So it basically runs all the way from Water Street, West Cordova, Powell, and back here. So there's lots going on, and we're all waiting. Are they counting down? No, they're not. But it's one of the biggest races because it's a criterium race, which means that they're on a circuit. So this circuit is about 1.8 kilometers. And for the women's race, they'll do 30 laps, which is about 42 kilometers in all. I think my math is right, don't check it. And this race attracts people from all over the world. Organizers say there's at least 13 countries represented here. And there's one from the US who's hoping to make her record better. She broke a record having won this race 4 times. She's hoping for the 5th time. So we'll see if that happens whenever this race starts. And it's just a really, really special race for this. So if it's for free, public are welcome, so come on down if you can. Oh, wait, I think they're about to start. No, they're not.
You
but
keep
Dan,
teasing
come on
us,
down when you got a
Caroline,
chance.
Well, I'm sure
I
you'll
know,
grab some
I
great...
want them to start. There's a men's race. Yeah, there's a men's race as well.
Well, I'm sure you'll grab awesome footage. We really appreciate it. Caroline Chan reporting just as the Vancouver Gastown Grand Prix is about to start, the women's race, and we'll have much more in our news at 11. Thanks, Caroline. Still to come, conserving one of the Fraser River's last salmon habitat strongholds. Our live guests will tell us why they've bought an island. Stick around. In the lower Fraser River near Chilliwack, there is an island that is pivotal to salmon and white sturgeon populations. Carey Island's gravel beds and side channels are a calm rearing habitat for those fish, and one that will now be protected. The Nature Conservancy of Canada has bought that island with the help of Ottawa as well as private donors. Joining us now is Jensen Edwards from Nature Conservancy of Canada. Jensen, thanks for joining us. First of all, what is it about this island that makes it so perfect and crucial for salmon and sturgeon?
Well, Carey Island is in a part of the river that we call the heart of the Fraser, and that's this stretch sort of between Mission and Hope, where there's a lot of opportunity for silt deposits and gravel deposits that are really important for salmon rearing and, as you said, for white sturgeon too. And the reason these places are really important to conserve now is that, well, about 90% of shorelines between here and the coast have been diked or ditched or otherwise modified. And in doing that, we're disrupting these natural channels, these natural places where salmon can find space to spawn. So that's why Carey is really important.
So what is the Conservancy's plan for the island now? How are you going to maintain the habitat when, as you mentioned, so much of the surrounding area is being developed, at least in some way?
Yeah, so by conserving it, we're automatically putting in place a plan that means that it won't be developed. So its shoreline won't be reinforced or won't be diked or anything like that, which means that its shoreline will actually continue to shift and flow with the river, because every spring with high water and when it all comes rushing down out of the mountains, it sculpts new channels around and even through the island, which means that fish continually have new places to sort of take refuge from that really strong current and grow up and spawn too. So by conserving it, we're ensuring that those important places will continue to exist for the benefit of the salmon, for sturgeon, and for us too.
Now, you're working with First Nations on this project as well. What does that collaboration look like?
Yeah, so conservation is by definition a team project. Even though this is a Nature Conservancy of Canada project, we know that groups like the Palalt tribe and others have been working in this area for a long time, doing restoration work and protecting these shorelines and gravel bars that are so important for the salmon. So we will continue to manage the island and look for ways to collaborate on the efforts that are already ongoing in this area so we can have maximum impact.
And lastly, we appreciate your time. Are there any other islands or spaces where you see the potential for conservation, something else you might be able to buy?
Yeah, right now we're just focused on Carey Island. We're really excited about it. I mean, the island itself is half the size of Stanley Park, so we've been talking about water, but there's a lot on the island too that offers habitat for lots of birds and reptiles like turtles. And so right now we're focused on building a property management plan for Carey Island and then working with neighbors and partners like the Palalt tribe and others to figure out how we can sort of all rally our efforts to support the salmon here.
Jensen Edwards from the Nature Conservancy of Canada, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
A promise to reform Indigenous child welfare. The details of a draft agreement at the Assembly of First Nations Conference. That's next. Child welfare has been a central topic at the Assembly of First Nations annual meeting this week. CBC News has learned Ottawa is offering $47 billion to reform First Nations child welfare. And as Olivia Stefanovich reports, that is double the amount first committed.
A source directly involved in the negotiations tells CBC News the Assembly of First Nations received a new offer from the federal government earlier this week, a proposal to spend $47 billion over the next 10 years to reform the First Nations child welfare system. AFN chiefs had the chance to go over the details behind the closed doors of the Assembly Hall at their summer gathering yesterday in Montreal. The media was not allowed inside to listen in, but we did have a chance to catch up with chiefs afterwards who left with mixed reaction.
We have to be able to analyze things. We have to be able to make sure that we're looking at what the system's looking, what's the effects, what are the things that are going to be looking different, to be able to say this is a good deal, not a good deal. I don't know what the deal is, right?
You know, First Nations children have spent enough time outside of their community, loss of identity. Now is the time to ensure that children who are in care have their culture, they have their language, and they have that accessibility to that.
While some AFN chiefs say they're excited about this new offer, others have concerns. They say they don't have enough information about the proposed deal to support it. The $47 billion offer is double the amount of money that Ottawa initially set aside for First Nations child welfare reform. Ottawa originally put aside $40 billion in total, half to compensate First Nations children and families, the other half for long-term reform, which still needs to be sorted out. First Nations children's advocate Cindy Blackstock has done her own calculations. She says Ottawa's new offer falls $10 billion short. She says it would cost $57 billion over the next 10 years to reform the First Nations child welfare system properly, and she has concerns about how these negotiations are going behind closed doors.
If this is a deal where there is not enough money again to be able to stop this discrimination and prevent it from happening again, then leadership needs to know that when they make their decision. And Canada cannot be blackmailing chiefs by saying, you either take this deal or you get nothing.
First Nations leaders will get a chance to vote on the final deal in September, when the AFN holds a special child welfare assembly in Winnipeg this fall. Until then, negotiations over the draft offer continue. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Montreal.
Canada is among the NATO allies that are part of a new plan to provide long-term support to Ukraine. More than 2 years into Russia's full-scale invasion, Ukraine's president has been pleading for more help and weapons. Foreign support has been spotty, but as Ashley Burke reports, that could change.
Support to Ukraine is not charity. It is in our own security interest.
After broken promises and delayed support, the head of NATO says it's time for a new pledge to help Ukraine in its fight against Russia.
To ensure that we have some kind of agreed formulas for burden sharing, that we have more transparency, and also that we have more accountability.
More accountability to make sure all allies at this NATO summit deliver, after a long lull in shipments hurt Ukraine.
So, of course, these gaps and these delays in military support to Ukraine, they created a very difficult situation for the Ukrainians on the battlefield.
On the eve of the summit, one of the worst attacks since the beginning of the war. It's reported a Russian missile leveled a children's hospital in the capital.
It's so difficult and to lose children.
As part of a new package to help, the U.S. announced a long-awaited promise.
As we speak, the transfer of F-16 jets is underway.
Supersonic jets from Denmark and the Netherlands to help boost Ukrainian Air Force defense. Canada will also expand its efforts to train Ukrainian pilots.
Those jets will be flying in the skies of Ukraine this summer to make sure that Ukraine can continue to effectively defend itself against the Russian aggression.
The U.S. also committed to new air defense systems for Ukraine, but gave no timeline when the shipments would arrive.
Ukraine can and will stop Putin.
Canada promised one of these systems more than 18 months ago, but it's still being built in the U.S. The government has committed another $500 million to support Ukraine and to boost its own protection in Canada by buying a new fleet of 12 submarines to detect and deter threats, but didn't say how much those submarines would cost or when they would arrive. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
To Gaza now, where Palestinian medical officials say at least 29 people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike. It hit a camp for displaced people in southern Gaza. Israel's military says it was targeting a Hamas fighter. Tom Perry is tracking the story from London, and a warning for you, the images in this story are graphic.
This incident happened in Abbasan, east of Khan Yunis. Palestinian officials say displaced people were living in tents outside a school and they were hit by an airstrike. Witnesses say there was a huge explosion. Bodies were thrown everywhere. A cameraman working for CBC News captured images of the dead and injured arriving at a nearby hospital. It's quite graphic, it's quite grim, but it does give an idea of the scale of this attack. The Israel Defense Force says it used precision munitions to attack a member of Hamas who took part in the group's attack on Israel on October 7th. Israel says it's reviewing reports civilians were harmed and that the incident is now under investigation. This comes after the IDF ordered the mass evacuation of parts of southern Gaza. There's also been reports the IDF has been dropping leaflets ordering people out of Gaza City. So across Gaza, there are tens of thousands of people on the move seeking shelter, seeking safety. And amid all this, you have the Israeli military launching repeated attacks, it says, to target Hamas. But as always, it's civilians paying the price. This does come as talks toward a ceasefire are resuming in Qatar. Brett McGurk, the White House envoy to the Middle East, met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. The Israeli Prime Minister assured the U.S. envoy he is committed to a peace deal, even as Israel keeps up its strikes within Gaza. There was also word from Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, the militant group that's been lobbing rockets at Israel from Lebanon, who was quoted as saying that if there is a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, that his group would halt its attacks without discussion. But right now, there is no ceasefire and there is no end to the killing. Tom Perry, CBC News, London.
Police in the UK have now arrested a man in a triple murder near the London suburb of Watford. A woman and her daughters were killed in a crossbow attack. As Chris Brown tells us, officials say the 26-year-old suspect was found injured and is getting treatment.
British police believe these unverified videos show the killer making his escape with a crossbow wrapped up under his arm. All day, they searched for Kyle Clifford, narrowing in on a cemetery in North London after he allegedly murdered Carol Hunt, who was 61, and her two daughters, Hannah and Louise, who were 28 and 25, in what police believe was a targeted attack. Some British media are reporting Clifford was Louise's ex-partner. Tuesday night, neighbors called police after hearing screams, but all three died before making it to the hospital.
A horrific incident involving what is currently believed to be a crossbow, but other weapons may also have been used.
As in Canada, crossbows are legal and easy to buy in the UK, provided you're over 18.
If they were brought in line.
But Laura Sugden has pushed the government to make the weapon as difficult to get as a gun after what happened to her.
I'm actually, in a week's time, I'm due to have surgery on my head because there's part of the bolt that's still inside my skull.
In 2018, Sugden and her partner Shane Gilmer were attacked by their neighbor using a crossbow. Gilmer was killed. She says Tuesday's attack triggers all of her old memories.
You know, it terrifies me to think that an 18-year-old could just go out and buy something like that, amongst the fact that people that are mentally unwell are aware that these weapons are absolutely deadly.
The UK Home Office says 10 people have been killed by crossbows in the past decade, while in Canada, murders are also rare, but far from unheard of, such as a triple homicide in Toronto in 2016. Kyle Clifford was eventually captured near his home. The focus will now shift to a grieving family, a community in shock, and questions about the weapon used to cause the carnage. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
Coming up, we're going to take a look at the harmful misinformation being spread on social media about sunscreen and why those claims run against years of scientific evidence. You'll want to see this. Misleading information about sunscreen is all over TikTok, telling people to stop using it or claiming they'll get cancer. Some posts have racked up close to 1 million views. But as Tashana Reed shows us, these claims contradict decades of scientific evidence about the dangers of UV radiation and the benefits of sunscreen.
To stabilize it and make it
It's a trending topic. Online influencers taking aim at sunscreen.
Sunscreen is a scam, and here's why.
I never wore sunscreen.
These are actually more dangerous than you burning.
Mainstream sunscreens. Making claims to hundreds of thousands of viewers, it does more harm than good.
These sunscreens that are on the market today are mostly toxic, and we know that they can actually cause cancer.
But get the sun, don't get the sunscreen.
This dermatologist says that couldn't be further from the truth.
Sunscreen is one of the #1 things that helps us prevent cancer. So the thing that causes cancer, particularly skin cancer, is the sun.
Sunscreen protects skin from the sun's ultraviolet radiation. There are two types of products, mineral and chemical, and both work in different ways to block harmful rays from being absorbed in our skin.
But you look at the whole breadth of the data that's available, and on the whole, it shows that all these chemicals are safe, which is why they're Health Canada approved.
Quebec's Order of Chemists even released a statement saying the misinformation circulating online could endanger public health, adding these influencers generally don't have the scientific expertise to assess chemical safety.
The people who are talking to you, who are they? What's their credential? Where did they get this information from?
Is there proof?
And now a counter movement, including medical experts, are debunking these myths online.
There is no evidence showing that sunscreen ages you.
Still, at this Toronto beach, sunscreen isn't a priority for everyone.
Don't feel the need for it, especially with the chemicals that are in sunscreens.
Most days I don't put any at all.
What you really want to do is protect yourself against the carcinogen that's coming from the sun's rays.
About 65% of melanoma cases, the deadliest form of skin cancer, are caused by UV radiation, but it is preventable, say experts.
Even one blistering burn as a child or a young adult doubles your risk of melanoma.
To avoid the risks, experts say use a sunscreen of SPF 30 or higher year-round, that adults apply 2 to 3 tablespoons every 2 hours, and to only take medical advice from trusted professionals. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
Darius Manavi joins us now with the provincial forecast. Out in the sun, Darius, I slap on the 60.
Yes.
Because you need it.
You do, yeah. There's a point where SPF, and like if you need SPF 200, not really any difference to 60, but sunscreen is very important. Please wear sunscreen. The UV, UVA, UVB penetrates into your skin, gets into your cells, can cause all kinds of problems, including making your DNA react with itself. And then when it tries to, very fun. Now, your cells are very good at fixing that kind of thing, but they don't catch it all the time, and that's how you get skin cancer. If you have sunscreen on, the sun's rays, the UV, harmlessly bounces off. So please wear it, especially right now. We have these ridiculously high temperatures across much of Canada and the U.S. The UV forecast, even here in Vancouver, is going to be very high tomorrow and for the foreseeable future. This is all through the next week or so. We're going to see high UV, so please stay safe and wear sunscreen. Now, before we talk too much more about BC, I just want to quickly highlight one interesting thing that's happening on the other side of the country, which is Hurricane Beryl made landfall in Texas for the third time it made landfall as a hurricane, Category 1 hurricane, but has since made its way up into eastern Canada. And so you can watch that happen here, that you can see the rotation there, and then it loses its formation, but still very, very heavy rains coming to parts of central Canada. And you can see that here as well. Some very, very heavy rain earlier today. We could use that rain, but we'll be thankful not to get the winds that they're getting along with that, because that's going to be the big story over the next few days. Any gusty winds, thunderstorm activity that's happening, that's going to be a big problem for us here. You can see that cold front that's going to be gusting over, and then another wave of precipitation will be coming later this week, and hopefully that'll be bring some relief, but also those winds. And we're also watching out for any convective activity, especially in the southeast tomorrow, because our highs are still quite high. So we're watching out for the wind, watching out for that precipitation and hoping for it, but we're going to be watching those temperatures as well, because they're not really coming down anytime soon in the south. Now, in terms of conditions across the province, still lots of sunshine, but we do have that chance of thunderstorms, not there, on the north coast, here in the central interior and down here in the southeast, and then overnight over here, but it should start to taper off into tomorrow. Southeast is where we're going to be watching probably the closest tomorrow for new fire starts, but overnight tonight also very likely in the north. So keeping a close eye on that too. In the morning, possibly a new cluster of fires up there in the north. Here in Vancouver, though, nothing but sunny skies. Please wear your sunscreen. UV is high, but also good time to go to the beach, I'd say.
No kidding, with the sunscreen. Yes. Thank you, Darius.
Thank you.
Canada's men's soccer team recorded a loss in arguably the team's biggest game in history. But there isn't a lot of disappointment. They lost 2-0 to World Cup champion Argentina with the great Messi. And as Katie Nicholson tells us, though, the Canadian team and its fans are looking ahead to even bigger success.
The Copa America signage has all but disappeared from the stadium, replaced with World Cup promotional materials. Of course, all eyes now looking into the future. For Canadian fans, that means that game on Saturday in Charlotte. That's where they're going to play the loser of the Colombia-Uruguay match and vie for third place in this Copa America tournament. The fans leaving here last night, surprisingly chipper considering their team had lost, but just pleased with this moment in Canadian men's soccer history and where the team is now positioned.
Just being here was a big win. It's amazing that they made it this far. It's just so exciting to come down and watch them play, and they look like they belong with the best team in the world.
Canada's a player in the big leagues, you know, that they're world-class players.
The Canadians did really, really well, so we're really proud of them.
There's a lot of potential, a lot of hope for the future, so I really feel like as though there is
World Cup in 2 years, right?
Exactly, World Cup in 2 years. We're so excited. We're going to be here.
So the big question is, what is the team going to do now moving forward to position itself to play better in the World Cup? Jesse Marsh, head coach, had some thoughts today. A lot of this is about really building up the bench, deepening it, making sure that there is a stronger roster of players so that they can actually cycle through players through a tournament like this where you have a number of injuries, where heat exhaustion comes into play, and just building on that really highly successful form of play that they have now adopted.
We've had a wonderful 5 weeks together, 6 weeks together, and it's gone way better than any of us could have scripted. So there's still a lot of work to do, but we've built a really good foundation, and I'm really optimistic about what the future can look like.
A couple of the players also talked about what happened last night. They talked about that moment when they started to feel the game fall apart. It's those insights that will help guide them forward into that World Cup as the team starts to regroup, get ready for the game on Saturday, and then look to the big stage, the World Cup in 2 years. Some of those games, of course, being played on their home turf in Canada. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, East Rutherford, New Jersey.
A Kelowna man and his gnomes separated after a yard sale. Then, a happy ending courtesy of a mysterious group. We'll explain after this. Last month, a Kelowna man hosted a yard sale. Soon after, he noticed 8 of his garden gnomes had gone missing.
His canoe and some tools had also been taken, so he assumed it was part of the same heist. But what happened next surprised him.
It was just so out of the blue, so to speak, right? I've had these gnomes 10 years just sitting in the yard. I get out there and I see there's only one, not 10, or 9, there's one. All the others are gone. Oh, well, these things happen. Middle of the morning last Wednesday, there's a quiet knock on my back door. I open the door and there's this nice older lady standing there with an envelope in her hand. And she hands me the envelope. I ripped it open. It's a gnome, just a hand-drawn cartoon style. And on the back, handwritten, is the Gnome Restoration Society. That's it. She pops the trunk of her little sedan, and there's this trunk full of gnomes, all beautifully and brightly colored. I can't stress enough the amount of detail that went into this. The love and the time is just amazing. Just to gesture it as a whole, but they didn't do a quick slap job. This was hours of meticulous, tiny little paint job work. The lady said that these people wished to remain anonymous. They weren't looking for the recognition per se, but what they've done is put a smile on so many people's faces. A great big thank you and a big virtual hug to each and every one of them. What they're doing is fantastic.
Blair says unless his stolen canoe comes back with a fresh coat of paint, he thinks the 2 robberies are unrelated.
That's a nice gesture. Know what I'm saying?
Wow. All right. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
Michelle Gasub is here at 11. Let's tune in.